The holidays were here in the Ramsay house. Everyone was gathered, and Gollum was chasing a mouse.
Come here, mouseses. We just wants to talk. We're not going to eat you.
Hey, you two, leave the mouse alone. Dinner's almost ready.
He got away. Stinky little hobbitses.
In the kitchen, Arnold worked hard to bake cookies and treats. Meanwhile, the announcers wondered if they had enough seats.
Where's the lemon extract? Give it to me now! Arnold, relax. It's right here. Oh, good. These cookies have to be perfect. Hey, Bradley. Yeah? How many people are you expecting again? I don't know if we have enough chairs. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. I think 10 chairs should be enough. Oh, wait, no. Make that 11. 11? Who else is coming? Oh, Tamsin G is joining us on this week's episode. Come on, did you really think I could pull off a cozy fantasy holiday feast? No, this whole idea was inspired by her work.
Bradley decided to do a holiday podcast inspired by Tamsin's writing. The whole idea was really quite exciting.
Thanks for doing the narration, by the way, David.
I don't mind at all. Oh, look, Bradley's receiving a phone call.
Oh, hey, my phone's ringing. Hello?
Hey, Bradley, it's Voidy. Finton and I are on the way.
Oh, sounds good. I'm guessing Finton isn't speaking to me after this past week's Order of the Pawn chapter.
Tell that monster of a writer I'm only showing up to meet Tamsin. She knows how to draw my good side, after all. Oh, and tell him I'm heading to her cozy fantasy world. I'm serious this time. Did you get all that?
Yeah, I heard him. Okay, I'll see you both soon.
The doorbell rang with a cheerful chime. Bradley looked down to his watch and checked the time.
Oh, that must be Lord Devereux.
Greetings, my friend. My apologies. Traveling here was quite the challenge. I had to download an app called Uber.
No worries, Lord Devereux. Oh, it's so good to see you. I'm glad you could join us for dinner.
Yes, of course. I brought a dish of my own as well.
Oh, wow. Is this a copy of the First Indulgence, a tasting menu of terror?
Indeed. I could not think of a better collection of rich horror flavors.
It's perfect. Come on in, my friend. Everything should be ready soon.
Bradley took a step back and smiled wide. The past year had been filled with highs and lows, but he took it all in stride.
Can't believe 2025's almost over. Huh, what a year.
With the food nearly ready to eat, Bradley had just one more task to complete.
Oh, yeah, good point, David. Where did I put my microphone?
As plates were prepared, it became clear it was no longer time to fast. It was time to feast and listen to a special episode of the Saved as Draft podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 49 of the Saved as Draft podcast. Today's special holiday-themed episode is all about celebrating the gift that you all give me every day, which of course is your stories and your art. So, like every week, we're celebrating the amazing work you do and the amazing people in our community who continue to support their fellow writers and artists. If you celebrate Christmas, I hope you had an amazing holiday yesterday. Before we get into the episode, I also want to shout out a new featured author this week. Last week, I talked about Spencer D.W., and this week, I want to share a few words about another one of my favorite horror authors, Mina Howell. Mina and I became friends shortly after I joined Substack back in January of this year. I remember reading a story of hers called Observing Oblivion, and it just blew me away. It had this eco-horror spin that reminded me of a project that I had started years prior but had never finished. So, I reached out and asked her if she'd be interested in collaborating with me on it, given that she has experience writing eco-fiction and eco-horror. She said of course, and the rest is history. Now what's funny is that project still hasn't made it out into the world, but it might. Even so, as the year went on, Mina participated in my writing challenges and eventually launched a few events of her own. She's also an early fan of this podcast right here, and shortly thereafter she started her podcast, the Penny Dreadfuls podcast, which launched earlier this year, and as many of you know, each week collects story links for shoutouts on our respective subscriber threads. Mina actually goes through the effort of compiling all those links for both of our shows each week, so she really is the MVP when it comes to collaboration. I have to give her a shout out for that as well. I also want to take a moment to recommend her incredible work. She has a book out called Ophiocordyceps Beginnings that is incredible if you're a fan of post-apocalyptic horror and video games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. And once you're caught up, the second book is already being posted right here on Substack, so be sure to subscribe. Her other series, Redemption is Overrated, is also amazing. This one is a modern take on Dante's Inferno, and just another example of how Mina's incredible range as a writer comes through in everything she does. So, a big shout out and a thank you to Mina for being such an amazing part of this community. Please check a link to her profile in the show notes and subscribe so you don't miss all the amazing stuff she's got going on. And that's our featured author for this week. Let's talk about today's episode. We'll start with our weekly shoutouts before taking a look at last week's Wandering Prompt winner. After that, I'll dive into the power-up prompt stories for this week's folklore prompt with help from J.M. Gooding. From there, we'll dive into our weekly writing discussion, which is about gifts for writers in the holiday season, and then it will be time for our featured guest interview. This week, I'm sitting down with Tamsin G., who's an incredible writer and artist that specializes in cozy fantasy, but she also dabbled in horror for a bit earlier this year, if you can believe it. It's a fantastic interview, so look forward to that later in the episode. And that's it for housekeeping this week. Let's dive into our weekly shoutouts right after a quick word from this week's sponsor. Today's episode of the Saved as Draft podcast is sponsored by Cryptid Cuties. I got it! I got one! What are you talking about? What is that thing? It's a cryptid cutie. They're a new line of cryptid-themed plushies. This one's a chupacabra named Choopy. Isn't he adorable? Sure. Hey, check it out. They talk too. Watch.
I'm going to take all your blood.
A little aggressive, don't you think? No, that's only the first half of the line. Here, watch.
Because I love you.
Oh, that's actually kind of sweet. Oh, hey, do they have a Mothman one? Of course, I already have a Mothy one. Here, check it out.
You'll never see me coming.
That's scary. Wait for it.
To give you a hug.
Okay, fine. They're growing on me. He's so cute. Well, you better grab one before they sell out. This holiday season, get the gift that's almost as hard to find as the real thing. Fight the scalpers and hunt down your favorite cryptid cuties today. All right, and we're back. Every Tuesday, I open up a thread in my subscriber chat for links of all kinds to your latest work. I select 5 at random to feature here on the show, so let's dive in and take a look at this week's shoutouts. Our first shoutout for this week is Lost by Richard Loader. This story takes place in the shoes of a hiker who finds himself lost in the woods of a national park exactly 1 year after his father disappeared in the same woods. I really love this story's sense of atmosphere and the way it layers on new concepts and potential terrors while always keeping the reader on their toes. At one point, you'll reason with yourself that it's probably an animal, or maybe just a noise that our character is hearing in the trees, but then something will happen that negates that possibility entirely. This back and forth continues all the way to the end when the truth is revealed and the motivations of our strange companion are revealed as well. It's an excellent story that kept me hooked the entire time. Here's an excerpt. As he continued to travel further through the forest towards his goal, Bobby noticed the trees increasing in density, though someone of his size and stature had no real issue navigating them. Whatever happened, he had to remain in the same direction no matter what, following the imaginary line he had envisioned in his head. He removed the marker pen from his bag and began marking trees to help his navigation, as well as serving as anchor points, should he have to return the way he came. In time, the little hairs on his arms and neck began to stand to attention. He had always relied on them over his other senses to warn him of things he might not initially be aware of, similar to the spider senses his favorite comic book hero possessed. Something felt off. An unknown presence surrounded him, and the ghastly stench had returned. The forest was deathly silent as he looked around, warily attempting to sense the disturbance that taunted his inability to detect it. Feeling the possibility of it being a bear or a cougar that had previously gorged on rotten prey, he ran as fast as he could through the densest part of the forest. He ran for what felt like hours, but most likely were mere minutes, ducking and diving through branches, withholding the temptation to stop and check if something was following. He knew more than anyone that the absence of sound did not guarantee that nothing was in pursuit. Oh, I love it. Great suspense in that excerpt there. Our second shout out this week is Glass Slippers and Iron Fists by Bent But True. This story is part of a new series called Fairy Tales for the Damaged, which reframes myths and fairy tales in new ways. In this piece, we're taking a look at the classic Cinderella story. Very quickly, Bent But True recontextualizes the classic story and shows us a haunting vision of what comes next after the supposed happily ever after. The structure here was excellent. The story feels like a realistic take on this classic tale, but it weaves in references to our world and how similar paradoxes of power play out when you're not in a fairy tale world. Bent But True also offers some helpful resources at the end of the story if the themes hit too close to home, which I appreciate. This combination of real-world themes and a far more realistic take on the classic story works really well. So, I'm excited to see more of this series as time goes on. Here's an excerpt. The fairy tale ends at the wedding, but that's when the real story starts. Cinderella steps into the palace wearing satin gloves, not to hide dirt, but to hold power. The girl they once ignored now sits on a throne, and suddenly everyone remembers her name. Not out of love, out of fear. The stepsisters arrive at court dressed in borrowed grace and trembling apologies. They expect banishment, maybe silence. But Cinderella doesn't send them away. She makes them stay. She parades them through the same ballroom where she once danced, now stripped of its music. They walk barefoot over broken glass, maybe not literal, maybe not every day, but always feeling it under their skin. She smiles as they curtsy, forced to serve the woman they once spat on. Some say she had their titles stripped. Others whisper she crushed their toes so no slipper would ever fit them again. It doesn't matter which version is true, the message is the same. You thought I would forgive. You thought wrong. Oh, chilling. I love that take on Cinderella. Definitely check that one out. Our third shout out this week is The Apollyon Curse, Marie Berger by J. Allen Winchester. This piece is a prequel tale set before Jaden's Dodecatheon saga. We join a character named Marie as she wrestles with how to move forward now that she's pregnant with a child. The world she lives in will not accept her child since they are half Graco, so she finds herself at a crossroads. Marie herself works at an orphanage, so she calls upon her fellow nuns to help, and they're happy to do so, but a darkness hangs over the entire situation. The Archbishop can never find out about the child's true identity. As with all of Jaden's work, this story is bursting at the seams with rich world building and characters. Jaden also narrates this piece and does an absolutely incredible job. You can hear the pain and hesitation in Marie's voice when he performs her dialogue, for example. If you're someone who loves falling deep into fictional worlds, you'll find a ton to love about Jaden's universe. Here's an excerpt. It took a moment for Marie to calm down, but when she did, Anna managed to get her to drink some water. The nun told her everything that had happened, shocking her friend. Marie then expressed her conflict over how to proceed. I know what the Archbishop thinks of the children of Graco and humans, but in my heart, I feel this child has a purpose from God. The Graco was a good man, Anna. You should have seen him, heard him. He didn't want to hurt me, but he also couldn't allow evil to possess his soul. He died weeping, Anna, sobbing bitterly. Such a good person should have their child brought up in love, shouldn't they? Anna sat in the hay next to Marie, thinking. For a moment, Marie looked anxious about what she would say to everything she had just blurted out. There was silence between them for a while, but finally, Anna turned to look her friend in the eye. Do you truly believe this Graco was a good person, Marie? Amazing. Just even that small little conversation, you can feel the weight of what's happening there. Great work from Jaden. Our fourth shout out this week is Samantha's Song, Chapter 1 by L.G. Wells. I heard talk of this new series from LG, so I was glad to see it pop up in my selections for this week's shoutouts. That being said, this is not a happy story. It comes from a place of personal experience, and I could really feel that in the way that it's written. The truth is woven into the story here in ways that spoke directly to my soul. The writing, of course, is exceptional as well. I was immediately attached to the characters, Samantha, of course, included. Unfortunately, things take a tragic turn before the end of this first chapter, and I'll be honest with you all, my heart was in pieces on the floor by the end. The emotion and pain in this story is represented beautifully on the page, and it resonates deeply, even without me knowing the real-life story that inspired it. This is a perfect example of how stories can capture important and impactful moments in a way that is universal to the human experience. Anyone can read this and understand, on a profound level, what happened here. I think the best excerpt I can share here is this beautiful introduction that LG wrote for this first chapter of the 7-part series. So, here's an excerpt from that introduction that LG wrote. This is a very personal story for me. For many years, this narrative has lived inside me, wanting to be written, but I lacked the courage to actually put ink to paper. It is a story inspired by events that truly happened to me, moments that carved themselves into my soul, and change the way I look at the world. It wasn't until I found the amazing support of my Substack family that I finally felt brave enough to share this. Your encouragement has given me the strength to revisit these memories and weave them into this tale. Samantha's song is more than just a story of love and loss. It is indicative of my deep-seated belief that music is far more than just sounds we enjoy. It is a truly transformative art form. It has the power to lift our spirits, energize our hearts, and in our darkest moments, perhaps even take us to a higher level of existence. I will be posting the 7-part serial starting tonight and concluding with the final installment on Christmas Eve. I invite you to join me each night as we count down to Christmas Eve. Please enjoy this holiday gift to you. Incredible work. Thank you to LG for sharing this story and that introduction there. Be sure to check the show notes for a link to Chapter 1, and as we heard, the other subsequent chapters are also available now as well. Our final shout out this week is Fox Manor Part 2 by Artemis. This is the new serial from Artemis with 2 parts available now and more on the way. It was initially inspired by Coral Evermore's monthly Evermore theme, which in this case was Fallen Grace. Artemis says their own fascination with mythology and mythical narratives led them to start this series inspired by the aforementioned theme. Here we explore the story of the Korean Gumiho, or nine-tailed fox. As always with Artemis's work, I love how quickly the story establishes an immersive and captivating atmosphere. Artemis always pulls me into the worlds of their stories, and I love it every time. The imagery is elegant, beautifully rendered, and it adds to the phenomenal quality of the writing overall. In Part 2, our character Grace is introduced to a servant named Jehezkiel, and while it's unclear what his motives are, he tells her that Miss Daniels has ordered him to be Grace's escort for the foreseeable future. The scene when they are introduced is suitably tense. There's something off about this character, and I love the way that Artemis subtly shows us that through the dialogue and body language. The complexities of their interaction and their growing relationship are an amazing narrative element here, but it's joined by some really fantastic dream sequences where Artemis's writing truly shines. I love the ethereal nature of these scenes, and I've seen Artemis use similar mechanics in other stories with a similar effect. It's really amazing stuff. Here's an excerpt from one of those dream sequences that I enjoyed. In her dreams, her skirts were heavy with mossy coins, and she was drowning. She floated through the dark, starry waters of the pond where she had met the foxwoman. Her rosary had been stolen by the waters, sunken far below her. She ought to have felt afraid, perhaps, but she felt peaceful. In the pond's watery embrace, nothing could harm her, no grief could splinter her heart. She let her eyes flutter shut. A soft, cold hand broke through the waters and grasped her arm. Her eyes pooled open, her drowning thoughts stirred. Nails bit into the skin of her arm, and she understood that the foxwoman had her in her clutches. She could not fight, could not run, as the nails tore 5-fingered gashes into her arm and fished her from the pond's gentle grasp. Grace lay against damp, night-scented grass, her hair smeared against her cheeks, her wet skirts clinging to her bare legs. Her arm shrieked, but she could not bring herself to look at it. Instead, she found her gaze drawn to that of the foxwoman, who leaned so far over that her black curls danced along Grace's ribs, and her beautiful features were inverted. Whew! Stunning work from Artemis there, and from all the shoutouts this week. Thank you to everyone who submitted links, and remember to check the next podcast shoutouts thread on Tuesday this coming week for a chance to be featured here or on Mina Howell's Penny Dreadfuls podcast. Next, we'll take a look at our Wandering Prompt winner and runner-up stories. Welcome, one and all, to this week's Wandering Prompt Award Ceremony. For those unaware, Wandering Prompts are special story concepts hidden in each episode of the podcast here. The first person to post a story or poem inspired by them wins the grand prize, but I choose a runner-up as well. This past week's Wandering Prompt asked for a piece about beings who discover their universe is about to end. We had 2 submissions total, and both of them came in within minutes of each other. I'll get to our winning story here soon, but first I'd like to give a shout out to our runner-up, which is a poem by Andy Scotts called A Stern But Caring Friend. I really love this piece because it captured the fear and determination of the prompt really well. It has a conversational flow between 2 opposing viewpoints, and the rhythm of each stanza is superb. I really love the final lines as well, which read, "I'll carve your face on stones, and when I reign as king on high, you'll shine in the jewels of my throne. So, hold steadfast to your form, try to force it past our end, but time is not your enemy, it is a stern but caring friend." A big shout out to Andy Scotts for the awesome submission here, and now, let's take a look at our grand prize winner for last week's Wandering Prompt. And now for a look at the winning story for last week's Wandering Prompt. The winning story from last week was An Epitaph by Jennifer Jorgensen. Glad to see Jennifer finally take home the win. Yes, Jennifer's been participating in the Wandering Prompts for a few weeks now, and she always has managed to post them just a few minutes later than the winner each week. So this week, she finally takes home a well-deserved win. And what a story it was. I got chills reading that ending. The concept is that humanity discovers that our universe is on the verge of collapse, so we come together to create a digital world where time runs differently to the point where we can live out full and meaningful lives. By the end of the story, we're sitting with the last living human before they upload their consciousness into the new simulation, which is described at one point as a life raft. It's a chilling conclusion, and honestly, one of my favorite stories from Jennifer, which is really saying something. What did you two think of this one? Oh, I'm still suffering from existential dread. So in other words, I loved it. The way Jennifer built this incredible world over the course of such a short story is truly impressive. I agree, Jennifer covered a ton of ground here. It's a really dense and rich story packed with some powerful themes. Let's check out an extended excerpt. They created a simulation that could utilize time dilation to make everything seem to last longer. The initial goal was to use that time to find a solution for the universe. But with only 6 months left, even if they did find an answer, it was unlikely they'd have time to implement it. And so they began digitizing people's consciousnesses. The tech for that had been around for years, but it was illegal. It became the only viable option for any kind of future. Server farms were cobbled together from every computer anyone could beg, borrow, or steal, and the race to digitize everyone was underway. It was a surprisingly simple process, but it required vast amounts of data storage, and every bit of industry on the planet was turned toward manufacturing the hardware to support it. It was the single most unified moment in the history of mankind, and it mostly worked. The failures were kept quiet. Within the first 2 months, they digitized almost 1 billion people. There were billions more, but as the technicians and experts were digitized, the process slowed. But no one wanted to be left behind. No one wanted to be last. Everyone wanted as much time as possible. Once digitized, their minds, their personalities, lived in a shared world much like the real one, but with abundance for everyone and some additional ability for each person to customize their own experience. If they'd done it in a less frenzied time, it would have made trillions as a saleable product. Instead, it was a life raft. Incredible work from Jennifer this week, and stay tuned for a new Wandering Prompt hidden in this very episode. Remember, it could show up at any time. Like now, for example.
Wandering Prompt 6. 1, 2, 2, 6, 2, 5. Write a story or poem about a character who discovers definitive proof of what happens after death. Show us what they did or did not find. 1,000 words or less. First to post a link in the comments wins. A second story will be chosen at random. Good luck.
All right, and we're back. This week's Power Up prompt was co-authored by J.M. Gooding, and it was folklore themed. Not only did J.M. write up the elements for us this week, but he also graciously read and reviewed the stories as well. So a huge shout out to him for all the hard work. I'm really excited to share his thoughts and a few of my own here as well. Your setting was the old village. Your character was the foolish child. Your conflict, the fate that follows. Let's dive in and see what everyone created. First up is Canto 2 by Nicholas Barely. Nicholas starts off by explaining that this poem is framed as a witch trial from different perspectives. What really lands is the handling of the fate that follows, the trailing shade, the sense of inevitability, the results of the implied curse. It all feels like the kind of story villagers would repeat because they don't know how else to explain what happened. It's folklore as survival manual, not bedtime story. The poem's voice is confident, the imagery is sharp in a few key moments, and that witch trial framing gives it a nice sense of collective dread. Nicholas understood the assignment, and they used the form to amplify the theme instead of hiding in it. A strong entry and a smart use of the prompt. And that's, of course, the review from J.M. Gooding. I totally agree, though. I thought this was fantastic. It was posted as a comment on the Power Up prompt post. And apparently, Nicholas is continuing this idea in a future project. So this is just a kind of a first look. and I'm really excited to see where it goes. Next up, we have Don't Feed the Snicker Cat by DBLK Rose of Black Spider Publishing. This story follows a curious young girl named Coram in an isolated village where the locals live by strict rules meant to keep an old danger at bay. When she decides those rules are more like suggestions, she discovers why they were written in the first place. Obscurum feels ancient without ever leaning on cliché, and the world building is woven into the narrative instead of dumped on the reader. The child at the center of the story is sharply drawn, curious, bold, and believable. Someone whose mistakes feel earned rather than forced. The cost? Folklore doesn't always extract a heavy penalty. A lot of folklore is designed to humiliate, to extract something small and personal. It marks, and it reminds everyone else of the cost of breaking the rules. This story nails that idea. The creature of the tale is handled especially well. It's memorable, eerie, and distinct, with imagery that lingers after I read it. The pacing of the encounters builds tension slowly before delivering a payoff that feels straight out of real oral folklore. And the story understands the assignment. The setting, the archetype, and the inevitable fate are all present and working together. And the ending doesn't coddle or explain, it just is. That's one of the major themes around folklore that I think a lot of people miss. Great review from JM there, and I agree. Don't Feed the Snicker Cat once again shows us why this author is so amazing at world building and doing it in an organic way. I have to really call that out because it's something I've noticed in all their work, and it's absolutely fantastic. Next up, we have The Pale Ones by Mary Ellen Brady. And here's what JM had to say about this one. This story follows a mountain village that survives by honoring old winter warnings. A young boy decides those stories are beneath him and steps outside the line everyone else respects. What answers him isn't weather, but something older. The fallout forces the entire village to confront what they've forgotten, and a sibling steps forward in a way that gives the tale its emotional center. It's folklore built around love, consequence, and a very old cold. And I have to say, this one is as polished as I would expect from Mary Ellen. The emotional thorough line is tight without ever slipping into Hallmark sentimentality. The setting work is excellent. The village feels ancient, lived in, and steeped in tradition. The forest has presence. The foolish child archetype works because Cat Evo's stubbornness comes from his personality. His doubt feels modern, but the world around him doesn't bend to it. Mary Ellen uses that tension well. The fate portion rises naturally. It's patient, atmospheric, and mythic. And the story smartly grounds the supernatural in community stakes. What the family and village must do in response gives the piece real emotional weight. The prose is confident, with strong control of tone and pacing. It reads like real folklore, shaped by a storyteller who knows how to pull at the heart without drowning in melodrama. Overall, it's a standout entry. Mature, atmospheric, and emotionally grounded in a way that elevates the entire prompt. One of my favorites out of the bunch. Amazing review from JM there, and honestly, I'm not surprised. One of Mary Ellen's greatest strengths, and she has many, is her characters. She always creates very rich, believable characters, and the emotions always feel earned and authentic, and I definitely picked up on that as well, so I agree completely with JM's review here. All right, and next up is a look at JM Gooding's power-up prompt story, Heimchin's Vigil. And with this one here, JM provided some extra context around the story, so here's what he had to say. Just wanted to drop some context here for you. Historically, folklore entities often begin as boundary keepers. They exist to warn, to solve a problem without morals. Something like, the forest swallows you up if you wander too far. Perchta is an actual ancient folklore entity. She's the mistress of the winter, known by many names across many cultures. The Krampus story has evolved, but in the beginning it was never about punishment. It was about warning to stay out of the forest. It escalated later to people wearing costumes and parading children who broke societal rules to the village square as a form of public humiliation. Later, when Christianity arrived, it was flattened in a power move. The church chose reward over punishment and subjugated Krampus to being a servant of St. Nicholas. Now, it's TikTok bait and dancing Krampuses. Krampi. Whatever. I actually saw a video last night with a few of them dancing. So the idea was more an origin story trying to explain how the Krampus came into being. So excellent context there for JM's story. And his ability to combine real historical context and details with fiction and with folklore is incredible. So please definitely check out the link to his story as a thank you for all of these amazing reviews that he wrote. And let's move on to the next one. We have Spirit in the Woods by Suparna Chakraborty. Here's what JM had to say about this one. This is a lighter piece, but it's smart. The tone is measured, almost anecdotal, which kind of fits the folklore that grows out of everyday life instead of grand myth. Suparna keeps the scale small, just a boy, a forest, and the sense of being noticed. The kid isn't malicious, he's a teenager who thinks warnings are boring. He's arrogant in a way that most people can recognize. The fate that follows is handled subtly. There's no big monster reveal, just trees behaving wrong. The creeping escalation, the shift in sound, the heavy branches falling in sequence is a good demonstration of how folklore generates itself. One strange night becomes a generational talking point. The story's clean, atmospheric, and it respects the prompt's core: a boundary crossed, a consequence earned, and a community that learns from it. Amazing review there of Suparna's story for this week, and I agree. Suparna's strength with the stories that I've read from them is really the way that they're able to kind of keep the scale and scope under control and fit it very nicely into a short story while also creating some compelling thoughts to leave with the reader. It usually kind of has open endings, which I really like. So great work from Suparna there. Next up, we have A Story About the Forest by E.H. Lau. And here's what JM had to say about this one. E.H.'s story presents a village-old warning song about children who disrespect the forest spirits and what comes back from the woods when they do. The story then jumps to an imperial force trying to bulldoze the same forest, convinced the danger is human sabotage rather than something older. Both threads circle the same truth: the forest doesn't play favorites. If you cross its boundaries without respect, it answers. I love the structure of this story. It embraces the historical truth that folklore was transmitted orally. The rhythmic repetition of the village's warning immediately sets the tone, simple and eerie, which makes it memorable. That story within the story approach feels like something kids would chant on a playground a few centuries too late. The first section handles the foolish child archetype well. 3 kids break a rule, thinking it's all adult nonsense, and the consequence is stark without being gratuitous. E.H. doesn't linger on gore, the absence of eyes, ears, tongue. It's all symbolic, and folklore loves symbols. The Empire section is a smart escalation. It shows how small-scale folklore collides with large-scale arrogance. I do that with my own folklore World War II mashups. Modern arrogance meets ancient truth. E.H. doesn't try to over-explain the spirits. Instead, they let the inevitable happen. The same fate that follows a child follows an army, just scaled to match. Bringing the opening verse back at the end ties the whole piece together and reinforces the idea that folklore is repetition, warnings that survive because someone ignored them once. It's straightforward, effective, and faithful to the prompt's core message: disrespect the boundary, and the boundary answers. Amazing review there of E.H. Lau's story this week. And having reviewed this author on a previous episode of the podcast here, I always really appreciate the level of detail they bring to their stories that kind of modernize mythology and folklore. You can tell they have an eye for those details and for the details that really made them special. So that comes through really nicely in this story as well. Next up, we have The Forest by C.J. Knight, aka Terrifying Tales. So here's what JM had to say about this one. CJ's story follows a curious boy who hears something calling from the forest. A sound just soft enough to feel personal, just strange enough to ignore every warning he's ever been given. When he steps past the village boundary, the forest doesn't attack him, it studies him, rearranges itself around him, and leads him somewhere that looks safe until it isn't. What happens next becomes the newest warning tale the village will carry forward. This entry hits the prompt's spine dead on. The village is beautifully rendered, insular, grim, and held together by shared fear rather than shared affection. The atmosphere is thick from the opening paragraphs. You can feel the cold, the silence, the claustrophobic closeness of a village that survives only by respecting the line where safety ends. Philip is a strong, foolish child. What makes him work is that he isn't bratty or cruel. He's curious in the exact way folklore punishes. He listens to the stories, nods, understands them, and then treats them as optional. That's a believable flaw, and it makes his crossing into the forest feel organic rather than contrived. The forest itself is excellent. The author captures that uncanny folklore logic where nothing is overtly magical, but everything is wrong. The shifting trees, the tapping sound, the moment where footprints disappear. Those are subtle choices that build dread without turning the forest into a cartoon haunted house. And the creature reveal. That's where the prose flares just enough. It's sharp, cinematic, and unsettling, without tipping into gore for the sake of it. The ending sticks the landing. It's clean. It's folklore. There's no moral to the story, just a disappearance, a new cautionary tale, and a forest that keeps waiting. Love that review of The Forest from CJ Knight. I have to say also, CJ's work always for me captures that phenomenal sort of atmosphere and sense of dread, and you definitely felt that with this piece as well, so great review there from JM. Alright, next up we have The Birch Line by Abhishek Banerjee, and here's what JM had to say about this one. This story centers on a winter ritual in a nameless village where offerings are left at the birch line to appease something ancient in the forest. Each year, the elders repeat the tale of a foolish child who crossed the boundary and never returned. But the narrator, a woman now old, remembers the real event behind the legend and the sister who challenged the ritual's logic. What follows is a story about how folklore becomes control, how tradition mutates, and how fear calcifies into something indistinguishable from truth. All in all, this is high-caliber work. Abhishek isn't satisfied with retelling folklore, they interrogate it. The structure is clever, a traditional winter cautionary tale wrapped around a deeper, more unsettling truth that the community itself refuses to face. That doubling creates a kind of moral conflict where the official story and the real story grind against each other. The atmosphere is exceptional. The village feels starved, cold, brittle, held together more by shared fear than shared history. The forest isn't a monster, it's an ecosystem warped by human ritual. That inversion is smart, and it works. The narrator's voice is a standout. Quiet, heavy, unadorned, but loaded with remorse and clarity. I'm a sucker for sparse prose, and this delivers. The contrast between what the village tells and what the narrator remembers makes the story feel lived in, not constructed. It shows a mature understanding of how folklore evolves to serve the people telling it. The emotional backbone, the sibling relationship, gives the entire piece weight. The writer spares the melodrama and lets grief sit quietly in the corners. The final effect is a story that honors the folklore prompt while pushing well past surface level scares. It's reflective, unsettling, and thematically rich. Yeah, I have to agree with Jam on this one as well. Abhishek is one of those writers that I've just started reading recently, but every time their work comes up on the podcast, I'm blown away. And I think a lot of that does come down to the incredible control they have over the balance between exposition and letting the reader's imagination take hold. They do a really nice job of that, so fantastic work here. Next up, we have The Forest Keeps by Jennifer Jorgensen. And here's what Jam had to say about this one. The Forest Keeps is about a young girl who slips beyond her village's boundary to gather what she needs to care for the person she loves most. The woods she enters are not passive scenery, but an old intelligence with its own rules, its own temperament, and its own sense of justice. What unfolds is a quiet, folkloric confrontation between innocence, cruelty, and the ancient forces that watch over the village. I really like this one. The story reads like something once told around a fire and earns its weight through atmosphere rather than spectacle. That's important. Folklore isn't always about monsters and spectacle, it can be about tactile things, and Jennifer nails this. Becca, the main character, is not idealized. She's scared, determined, and painfully aware of the stakes. The forest feels old and lived in, but more than that, there's a strong sensory grounding that leans heavily on tactile details. Roots, bark, the chill under the canopy, the hush of fading village sounds. It gives the story a physicality that makes the folklore feel earned rather than ornamental. But most of all, this piece shows that Jennifer understands the systems in folklore that make it work. Danger, consequence, and the ideas that stories exist because someone ignored the boundary. They're stories that teach a lesson without moralizing, and Jennifer's story does just that. It ends exactly where it should, leaving just enough shadow behind for the reader to sit with. Amazing review there from JM. And yeah, absolutely. Jennifer's story here, and honestly with all of her stories, she really understands what the kind of most important elements of the genre that she's working in are. And obviously here we see that she has a very strong understanding of what makes folklore tick. And it's one of the many, many reasons why Jennifer is one of my favorite writers to read. So fantastic work. And next up, we have Grief's Bargain by Verdant Butterfly. Here's what JM had to say about this one. This one really hit a home run. The story is set in a remote village that follows old customs and unspoken rules. It follows a child born under an ominous sign and the quiet consequences of a grief-driven promise made in desperation. As the girl grows, her warmth and generosity seem to draw unseen attention, and the village's long-ignored folklore begins to stir. When an old debt resurfaces, the community is forced to confront what was spoken in sorrow, and what it truly costs to set things right, discovering that some bargains cannot be escaped alone. This piece is really good. One of the things that Heather/Verdant Butterfly really nailed with this is that folklore isn't just some aesthetic, it's a worldview. Much of the events in folklore are transactional. Call it a contract or a boon or a deal made of grief, it doesn't matter. Folklore always balances the scales, and that's exactly what this piece does. The bargain itself is clean and cruel, grief traded for quiet. That's exactly how these stories work. A woman saying the wrong thing at the wrong time and meaning it is authentic to folklore logic. And I also want to point out the usage of a brownie is spot on. It's practical, petty, sharp-edged, and morally sideways. It only has a contract to collect. Contracts hate witnesses is folklore literate. Amazing work for this week's prompt. And yeah, I have long sang the praises of Verdant Butterfly on the show here, but it's worth noting that a lot of Verdant Butterfly's work is inspired by Scottish folklore, and so it's not a surprise at all to see that she really brought her A game with this story here, and it truly is one of the best. I think it is my favorite, honestly, of the stories this week. So, amazing work. Let's move on. We have next, The Fourth Bell by Connor Mancuso. Here's what JM had to say about this one. A remote village survives winter by strict rules and older stories meant to keep its children alive. When an unusually harsh winter brings an unexpected warning, a curious child crosses a boundary no one is meant to test. What she encounters does not destroy her, but reshapes her role in the village, turning a familiar cautionary tale into something heavier, more deliberate, and harder to ignore. I was genuinely hoping that Connor would drop a few of his famous prose-style lines in for this prompt, and he didn't disappoint. The Fourth Bell is very strong folklore work, and his lyrical style works well for the story. The repetitions, the ritual phasing, the way lines function like oral memory rather than plot delivery. It reads like something designed to be told, not merely read. I love that the village was described to be constraining. The forest, the river, the road, they're all forces, not locations. Everything exists to narrow choices. That's exactly how folklore settings should function. Anya is not reckless for drama's sake. She's curious, observant, attentive. Her foolishness is ritual, not moral. The story understands that folklore children aren't stupid, they're necessary. Someone has to test the boundary so the boundary can exist at all. And honestly, this is cosmic horror discipline applied without cosmic sprawl. The scale is intimate, the terror is local, the unknown is bounded. That restraint is doing real work here. The story understands that folklore is not about fear, it's about memory being heavy enough to stop a hand. This is my favorite out of a strong batch of stories this week. Awesome, great stuff from Connor there. And yes, I have to give Connor the nod as well to this story for being able to rein in the scope of cosmic horror and have it fit really well within the context of folklore. Love, love, love that. Nice job from Connor. Our final power-up prompt story this week is actually a poem, and it's called The Lost Colony by Mina Howell. This poem from Mina immediately reminds us all why it's truly a treat every time she posts poetry. This haunting piece reads like classic folklore in that it feels like it has been passed down for generations as a warning. In this piece, we learn about a village where stepping beyond the boundaries is a death sentence. Despite this, the village has grown to the point where they can't continue to live inside its walls. A child, as per the prompt, decides to test the warning by leaving the village. Others follow, and the resulting events become the warning we're left with at the end. It's haunting and beautiful in equal measure. Another excellent poem from Mina. And thank you again to everyone who submitted power-up prompt stories this week. I really hope you enjoyed these incredible reviews here from J.M. Gooding. If you're not subscribed to J.M. yet, now is the time. His catalog of work spans all manner of folklore and historical warfare, as well as plenty of other topics and genres as well. And if you enjoyed his reviews, you will love his writing. Next up, we'll take a look at the final indie release radar for 2025. Hello and welcome to this week's indie release radar, powered by BookStack. We've got one more book release to share with you all before the end of the year. It comes out on the 31st of December, actually.
Wait, if it comes out on the 31st, how am I supposed to finish it before the new year?
Arnold, you don't have to finish it before January 1st.
Yes, I do! Hurry up, I have to get started!
Okay, let's dive in. So, coming out December 31st is The Book Daddy by K.M. Avery. The Book Daddy is a new romance novel set in the upstate New York town of Maple Brook Falls. It stars Ivy Rose, who finds herself on a week-long vacation that's going to change her life when not one, but two people find themselves falling for her. Find out if this trio will be able to navigate their relationship while also saving a small town from certain ruin in this new release from K.M. Avery. Well, there you go, Arnold. Any final thoughts before you dive into this one?
Yes! I'd like to clarify that this book is not my daddy.
Of course it's not. You know what? Come to think of it, who is your daddy and what does he do?
That's classified!
Oh, wow. Okay, well, enjoy reading The Book Daddy, Arnold.
I will. I think I'll start calling him my book stepdaddy.
I'm not sure that's any better. Thanks again to Hazel and BookStack for sponsoring this segment. Stay tuned for more indie releases as we head into 2026. All right, and we're back. This week's writing discussion was holiday themed as well. I asked my fellow writers to talk about the best gifts they've given and received as writers. As you can guess, the answers include books. But I also enjoyed seeing everyone's input here. Some really cool ideas. I myself received a few writing-related gifts from Sarah this year, including some books that double as tabletop RPGs and incorporate writing as part of the gameplay, so I'm really excited to check those out. She also got me a book with daily poetry practices, so I can continue to level up my poetry game. Honestly, she really knocked it out of the park. I've never really received such, kind and considerate gifts related to my writing before, so I loved everything she got me. Shout out to my girlfriend Sarah for always being amazing. Okay, let's see what everyone else had to say for this week's writing discussion. All right, and first up on this week's writing discussion, Mina Howell says, I really like desk decorations. So if the Pocket Pantheon was real, I promise you I'd have the whole set. And of course, for those unaware, the Pocket Pantheon was one of the fictional sponsors on a prior episode of the podcast here. They were desk decorations of common Greek mythological characters. I believe it was on the episode where I interviewed Isabella Neshwat. So yeah, fingers crossed. Maybe one day they will be real. I love that answer though. Next up, Artemis says, the best gift I've received as a writer has to be books, obviously. I think my favorites so far are two beautiful hardcover collections of short stories, one of the Grimm fairy tales and one of H.P. Lovecraft stories. I've also received a very beautiful edition of Alice in Wonderland, which might be my favorite book of all time, and which I have too many versions of. I love that that's Artemis's favorite book of all time. I can definitely see the influence in their work. And those other hardcover books sound amazing as well. I think, honestly, special kind of hardcover special editions of books is a great idea as a gift for writers. So awesome answer from Artemis. Next up, Daniel Coates says, notebooks. You can never have too many. And I agree with that. Honestly, one of the worst things that can happen as a writer is that you have an idea and there's nowhere to write it down. Like me, I'll usually throw it in the notes app on my phone, but preferably it'd be nice just to write it down. You just get that kind of tactile feeling of being like, have an epiphany and then write it down. You know, it's nice. So I agree. Notebooks are a good one. Next up, Kyle A. Massa says, my wife got me a desk that was my pride and joy, the perfect place to write each morning. It fell apart when we moved, and I was emotional for days afterward, LOL. Well, Kyle, I would be emotional as well, especially if that desk meant so much to me. That's such a wonderful gift. Hopefully you were able to get another one, because that's a, right now that's a tragedy. But thank you so much for your answer there. Next up, J.M. Gooding says, gift idea for me, new keyboard. This one has a head-shaped divot in the middle of it. Oh, I love JM's sense of humor. Honestly, my keyboard is about to have a head-shaped divot in the middle of it because I've had it for several years and I love mechanical keyboards, but certain keys just aren't working as well. You know, like sometimes I have to hit it like 18 times to get it to work. And I think it's just because it's old and it gets a lot of use. So obviously I clean it and stuff too, but yeah, I'm looking forward to a new keyboard at some point. That's my point there. So thank you to JM for that response. Next up, Ludmilla Bruce says a paper notebook and ink pen. And yes, I agree, much like Daniel's input there. A notebook and a pen unlocks so much potential for writers, and it's a great gift, especially if you can find nice versions of both, or even one that's themed around something that the writer you're giving it to likes. So great input there from Ludmilla. Next up, Mary Ellen Brady says, best gift for me, my best friend found a vintage 1930s glass-sided typewriter, because that was the kind I played on when I pretended to write Starlight Cove stories when I was 3. It is my treasure. The original was a great aunt's or something and was lost. Sad to hear that it was lost, but that's such a wonderful gift. Wow, a vintage typewriter. That sounds beautiful. And I love that Mary Ellen started working on Starlight Cove all the way back when she was 3. I love Starlight Cove. I love that universe. So that just makes me love it even more. Thank you to Mary Ellen for that one. Next up, Hazel Allen says, journals and ink pens, though admittedly I like to collect them more than actually use them. And you know what? That's fair. I'm the same way when it comes to a lot of things. But yeah, definitely journals and ink pens. But again, like I said, having some paper, a place to write down your ideas, never a bad thing, right? Thank you to Hazel for that input. Next up, Jennifer Jorgensen says, I don't think I've ever gotten a gift as a writer or given one to a writer. I type everything, so pens and notebooks don't really do anything for me. I suppose for me, a subscription or license for writing-related software would be nice. I love my plotter, and I've considered trying others. I think my grandma gave me a subscription to Writer's Digest when I was in college, so I guess that counts. And I'm always happy to get books. Yeah, Jennifer brings up a good point there. Empowering writers with different software, like for example, I use Scrivener for my screenplay writing that I do for the upcoming animated series that I'm working on. And so yeah, stuff like that, subscriptions or licenses for software is great. I also remember Writer's Digest. That's really cool that Jennifer's grandmother gave her a subscription to that. I remember reading that when I was younger. And of course, books, right? Books are always a great gift. Next up, Connor Mancuso says, I truly don't think I can think of a best Christmas gift I've gotten but my favorite would have to be two. One is a handmade, hand-spun Irish wool sweater from Ireland and a pocket watch. As for the best gift for writers, that's a loaded question depending on who you're asking, but for me, it would be some combination of journals, favorite books unowned, or in my instance, a free write typewriter, something I'm still trying to save for. Yeah, that's fair. When I asked this question, I didn't think about how it would be very specific to writers. But hey, we still got some good answers. And yes, a free write typewriter, they are expensive, but man, are they good. They're really, really good. I have one myself. If you get a chance, look them up. It's just, if anything, the design is beautiful, but functionally, it's a great gift for writers as well. Next up, Dr. Noor A. Jahangir says, a Remarkable 2 from my wife. And yes, Remarkables are another really good gift for writers. Similar to the free write, they're kind of a tech infused way of getting writing done. The Remarkable 2, if I'm not mistaken, allows you to kind of write things down with a pen, but you're using like digital e-ink paper. So it's almost like a digitized version of a journal. It's pretty cool. So great answer there. And last but not least, Eric McCormick says, an extra 4 hours crammed into each day for the next year or so. Yeah, wouldn't that be nice, right? Some extra time definitely wouldn't hurt. I love that. Thank you, Eric. All right. Well, thank you to everyone who shared their thoughts for this week's writing discussion. Next, we'll dive into our featured guest interview right after a quick mindful moment. Hey there. This is Chill Bradley, here with this week's mindful moment. Here's a quote to consider. As a child, I considered such unknowns sinister. Now, though, I understand they bear no ill will. The universe is, and we are. That is Solanum from The Outer Wilds. When I first finished the video game The Outer Wilds, I didn't really know what to think. Later, I finished it again alongside its DLC expansion, The Echoes of the Eye, and I think that second time was my favorite. The DLC adds another layer to the story and expands the ending, but in both cases, I came to a realization over the course of playing the game. Now, this requires a quick explanation. In The Outer Wilds, you're trapped in a time loop. Every 21 minutes, the sun goes supernova, wiping out you and everyone else. Then, you wake up again at the beginning of the loop. It's a cycle you'll spend the entire game within as you hunt down clues to piece together what's happening. Now, the reason this is important is that I spent countless loops trying to solve this mystery. I died over and over. But that's the point. You're meant to complete as many loops as you need. But something happened in between all those deaths for me. I started to become okay with it. You see, there's a music track that plays when the sun is about to explode. You can look at it from wherever you are in the solar system and see it turning a deep red before it collapses. Sometimes, though, I was inside or underground and the music would just kick in. It's haunting, peaceful. Honestly, the game's soundtrack is incredible. I reached a point where I would hear the music or see the sun starting to expand, and I wouldn't be scared. I wouldn't even be angry. Honestly, I would just stop what I was doing and set the controller down. I felt acceptance. I felt peace. I was okay with this being the end. Of course, I knew the loop would reset, but still, there was something profound about that feeling. I didn't regret the time I'd spent exploring and uncovering new knowledge. I didn't throw my controller in rage knowing my job was unfinished. I just smiled. I let the music swell, and if I happened to be outside, I would look at the sun as it collapsed, sending a wave of brilliant blue fire across the solar system. And then I woke up, ready to begin again. And I think the takeaway here is that endings don't always have to be scary. They also don't need to be the end of the story. They can be the ending of a chapter. Your adventure, my adventure, is still ongoing. So, embrace the journey and live in the moment. Thanks for listening. Back to the show. All right, and we're back. So for this week's featured guest interview, I'm excited to welcome to the show a phenomenal cozy fantasy author, artist, and someone I am deeply proud to call my friend. This week's guest is also a pivotal member of the team who compiled and released a brand new anthology of stories from my first Indulgence Challenge. This anthology includes stories from the event and original art to match. The community came together to create this book as a way to honor the event and as a means of helping me financially using sales from the book. I do not have the words to convey how much I appreciate this gesture from the community and everyone involved. Not only that, but to see these stories brought together with art to match is truly humbling. So, if you'd like to pick up your copy of The First Indulgence, A Tasting Menu of Terror, I'll drop a link in the show notes. And with that, let's dive into this week's featured guest interview. All right, everybody, and this week on the Saved as Draft podcast, I'm very excited to welcome an artist and writer of cozy fantasy who many of you may recognize. Please welcome to the show, Tamsin G. Tamsin, thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. It's an honor to be on here and being able to talk to you in person.
I'm very excited for this interview. So let's start out by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and your creative journey thus far.
Hey, yeah, I am a stay-at-home mom of 3 children. My oldest is 5 and my youngest is 1. So not a lot of age gap there. So I try to find my creative endeavors kind of in between moments of life, and usually after kids go to bed. I'm kind of a creative tornado, so I kind of just do so many different creative outlets and like writing, art, crafting, sewing, all of the fun things. It's just kind of my thing. I am creative all the time.
No, I love that. I love that. So were you always kind of a creative person? Like when did you first kind of, feel that spark, I guess, in terms of writing or art or kind of wherever you first started, kind of on that creative journey?
I think probably in school, especially elementary school when they started doing like art classes and music and theater. I think that really sparked my creative journey. Especially like art classes, I think was my earliest memories of like being creative, where I learned how to draw a house and I was like super excited that I know how to draw a house now. And then writing wasn't until way later when I was in like middle school, and I had a really good teacher where she like really encouraged my writing, and she like even read some of my stories aloud to the class, which like made me feel really good. So
wow, that's amazing.
yeah, it was really sweet of her.
Do you remember any of those stories from back then? Just like any kind of memories about what they were about?
So one of them was actually about my dog dying.
Oh no.
Which seems to be a theme lately, but another one would be a poem that I wrote about like moments of noticing people and like having a moment of time with random strangers and then like never seeing them again. But like there was a moment that you just remember that you had a moment with that one person. And what else? I wrote a lot of fan fiction to books that I read, which was kind of fun, but that never really saw the light of day. And then me and my friend, we would pass stories. Like we would write little paragraphs and then pass the story on to each other.
Oh, that's awesome.
But my teacher never read that. But she did take it away from us multiple times because we weren't paying attention in school. But yeah.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, no, I love that. The writing stories and kind of passing them around. It reminds me of I'm sure you've heard of it these days on Substack. Mina's been doing those collaborative stories where writers will sign up and everybody kind of adds a couple paragraphs. It makes me think back to those days, like what you were saying just now.
Yeah. I've done a few story tags with some of the authors on Substack as well. It's been fun.
Awesome. No, I love that. I love that. So these days, you are pretty widely known for your cozy kind of fantasy fiction. My question is, did you start with that, or what genres have you kind of gravitated towards over the years? Obviously, like I said, nowadays you seem to be kind of in the cozy realm, but curious kind of what your journey was like there.
I gravitate more towards fantasy. Like that is my biggest gravitation. Cozy has been a little bit more recent with like the cozy fantasy books that have been out there. I don't know when the cozy fantasy fad started, maybe like 5 years ago. But yeah, I started reading those books and I'm like, I can do that. I can write cozy fantasy. And so I kind of just started doing that. Maybe about a year or two ago is when I started writing again
Hmm.
after a long period of not writing. I was doing a like fantasy challenge or like a contest, and that's kind of how I kind of got back into writing. And the prompt was cozy fantasy, and that's kind of how I was like, okay, I can do this, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And so anyway,
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. Really cool that a contest that happened to be Cozy Fantasy kind of got you back into
uh,
writing. I think that's really. I love little stories like that, just kind of like little
mhm.
coincidences like that. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
um, that's amazing. So when it comes to your kind of fantasy writing, cozy or otherwise, what are some of the like common themes that you tend to focus on? Like what are some of the kind of key takeaways that readers can expect when they read your work?
So I try to throw in life in general, where
Hmm.
like I talk about kind of heavy topics in a lighter context,
Yeah.
where like depression and anxiety and like loneliness and grief, um, and just kind of like exploring that in a cozy way, but kind of resolving it in a way that could be healing to some people.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of what cozy fantasy is kind of exploring those themes in a unusual way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good description of your work and of cozy kind of fantasy in general. The title escapes me, but I remember several months ago reading one of your stories that was it's like you said, it dealt with some darker themes, but the
Mhm.
way that you approached it, I think the best way to describe it was like a gentle, right? Like it was very, it wasn't like in your face, and it was it was kind of like orchestrated into the story where it made sense, and it had something to say, but it wasn't like harsh about it, and
Mhm.
it was it ultimately left you with like a positive outlook,
Mhm.
which I think is beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, thank you.
So speaking of kind of getting back into writing, like you said recently, how long have you been on Substack now?
I think it's been about 7 months.
Okay, awesome. Okay. And what's your overall kind of a opinion of the community here? I know you've been getting kind of a bit more involved lately. I've seen you running like some challenges and stuff too. So yeah, how's the community treating you so far?
I love the community on Substack. It's really encouraging. I actually joined Substack kind of to see like what's going to happen, and I really did not expect kind of the reception that I received. Uh, the people are like very supportive, and I've made tons of friends, and they just they love to collaborate with me, and there's just lots of creative outlets, I guess. I'm going crazy with all my creative outlets, and I don't have enough time for it, but it's still fun.
No, for sure. Yeah, I think all of us can relate to that in the sense that it's like, life can be chaotic and insane all the time. You really just have to kind of find those quiet moments when you
Mhm.
can for the creative stuff. Um, yeah, and as I was saying just now, I've noticed that you've been doing kind of like some collaborative stuff, some writing challenges. Curious, like how many of those have you done? Do you have anything going on right now that people could jump into? And what's kind of some of the lessons that you've learned so far about running events like that? Now that you've done a few, I think.
So I did one challenge back in October,
Hmm.
and it was a cozy autumn prompt challenge. And then right now I have a cozy winter challenge. And the takeaway for me is to not be too serious about it, allow people to have grace and not burn themselves out, you know?
Hmm.
I think the biggest thing would be encouraging people, like encouraging them. And a lot of the time, it's people that haven't been writing for a long time,
Hmm.
and they're super encouraged by having all these prompts and like just kind of sparks of imagination with the prompts that you give out. And they really enjoy that, and they want people to like see it. And so just make sure you're like showing interest in their work and reading it and lifting them up, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that perspective, especially because it mirrors a lot of what you were saying about how you got back into writing, right? Like it was a
Mhm.
challenge that you had joined. So I love that you're kind of now doing that for other people, right? Like creating those
Yeah.
opportunities for them to kind of get their spark back.
Mhm.
And I think, from my perspective, I would wholeheartedly agree that that's one of my favorite parts about doing kind of writing prompts and challenges is just seeing all these new faces popping up and like you said, people saying, "Oh yeah, I haven't written in forever," or "This kind of got me back into it," and it's just like there's really no better feeling. Like it's amazing.
Yeah.
So, my next question here is related to the First Indulgence anthology that just launched today, as of this recording
Yeah.
here. But yeah, so for listeners, I'll talk about this earlier in the episode. But just to recap here again, real quick, this is a compilation of stories from the First Indulgence horror writing challenge that I did. And Tamsin, obviously, you were involved with this, and so I'd love to know more about kind of how you got involved with it, what role you played in the project, and just kind of your overall, thoughts on it now that it's out in the world.
Yeah. So originally I received a message from the Circus Dragon, and she asked if I would be willing to illustrate for this anthology. And she kind of explained that it was kind of like a thank you to you for the support and encouragement that you have given so many of us. And like, of course, I didn't hesitate to say yes because you've been like a cornerstone in helping me in my confidence in writing and my work. And so I was like, okay, let's do it.
Right.
Um, it's kind of funny because they're asking the cozy fantasy writer to talk about horror, but these writers like are awesome, and it's been fun to kind of dive into a different world um, for illustration and stuff. And joining this anthology, I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but it was amazing. Like everybody's coming together, and like there's 24 people coming together and making this thing that you know didn't exist before. And probably my favorite part is just watching people like come up with ideas and see how people's minds work, and especially like the illustrators and their interpretations of each of the stories is just like, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And as each one came in, I was like, that's amazing. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, I love how just, because it's even more than just like your standard anthology. Like, yes, it's a collection of
Mhm.
stories, but like as you said, there were artists involved, and there's all this incredible kind of new art that wouldn't exist otherwise for these
Mhm.
stories. And it's just it has been, I've been kind of, following along and helping however I can, but it was very much all you and the team that worked on it, and it was just so incredibly humbling to see, and I'm just insanely
Mhm.
grateful because it's like I've never, in all my years, been part of a community like this one, let
Yeah.
alone had so many people kind of pitch in their time and their creative,
Mhm.
sort of energy
Mhm.
to make something like this. It leaves me speechless, honestly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, obviously, a huge thank you to you and to everyone involved with that. It wasn't expected, but it was I'm just so grateful. And yeah, it turned out fantastic. So, speaking of your art, as you said, you did some art for the anthology there. Also, for anybody listening who is not already aware, Tamsin was the first person ever to draw Finton Marybrook from my Devine fantasy universe, and I was just so excited when you shared that with me. It's to this day one of my favorite pieces of art ever. Just incredible the way that you captured exactly how I pictured him.
Well, I'm so glad that you think so.
So my question here is, when it comes to your art, the art that you do, what kind of art projects do you typically work on? And as I'm sure people listening are wondering, do you offer commissions at all?
Yeah, I don't usually broadcast that or share that because I feel like I'm still kind of a baby in the art world and I still have things that I need to learn. But yeah, I mean, I would totally do a commission for someone if they feel like they can trust me. But as far as projects that I've been working on. I'm currently working on like children's story with someone else on Substack. And that's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be super whimsical, I promise.
Nice.
And I also am working on another children's story that I'm wanting to illustrate myself. But that's going to be a while. So, but yeah, there's not really a lot of art like going on right now, other than the anthology and that other children's book that I've been working on with someone else. So yeah,
Gotcha. So the children's book that you're currently working on, are you doing the art and writing for it, or just the art?
just the art. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Nice. Okay, cool. Well, that's great. So my next question here, this is kind of a deep cut into like Substack community lore, I guess is how I would describe it. But earlier this year, there was a really funny kind of running joke where you had changed your screen name from Tamsin G to Tamsin E, and you had
Mhm.
kind of a funny kind of evil version of your profile picture. And during that time, you had experimented a little bit with some horror stories. I think this was during the first Indulgence Challenge, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken, when this was going
Yeah.
on. What is the whole story behind that, if you don't mind sharing? Because I just thought that was such a funny thing that was like, again, it's like part of Substack lore now forever.
So speaking of dead dogs, Poppy Nielsen came across one of my stories. It's called Gabe's Boots, and the ending of the story, the dog dies.
Mm.
And she did not like that. And she said that my cozy license needs to be revoked. And she reported to the authorities about that. And so I couldn't write cozy anymore. So
Ah.
I decided that horror was going to be my jam for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, let it engulf me and take over. And it
Mm-hmm.
totally did. It was a lot of fun to mess with people and just have fun with them.
Yeah, for sure. It was so much fun to watch from the sidelines, and because I'm a horror writer and someone who enjoys, obviously reading horror, it was really fun to see you kind of experimenting with that genre. Is it something that you would ever go back to, or is it something now where you're like, okay, I tried it and I'm good?
A little bit more and maybe a little bit darker themes. Not just horror, I think would be interesting. Kind of maybe dark fantasy. And I do have some stories in mind for that in the future that I want to explore, especially like dreams that I've had. There's
Hmm.
some horror stories in those dreams. So, yeah, maybe I'll go Tamsin E for a little bit.
Kind of switch back to the alter ego, as it were.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So, yeah, looking towards like kind of the coming year here, 2026. Curious, you had posted. I pulled it up just to look at it again. You had posted a post called "Works in Progress" that I really liked, where you kind of broke down like all of the projects that you have going on. And obviously, you don't need to go through every single one of them unless you would like to. But yeah, just curious, like in the coming year here, what are some projects that people can expect from you? Especially anything, big like a book or something that you're working on.
Yeah, so one of the big projects that I'm working on right now is actually still in progress. And it's called Dear Monster Go Away.
Hmm.
And it's about a girl who is unable of feeling fear. And she's in charge of this station in the world to guard this portal that has monsters on the other side. And the only way for these monsters to cross into the world is if there is fear around it. And occasionally these little monsters will kind of trickle in because there's like fear in the world. And it's kind of, the more fear in the world, the more that they'll kind of come through. But if there's someone close by that has fear, it's more likely to let in more monsters. And so this girl, she's kind of just like living her life by herself and unafraid of these monsters that kind of trickle through. And then she just kind of like puts them back in the portal, And then one day she discovers that there's this monster on the other side of the portal, and he's kind of like a humanoid monster. And he kind of talks with her, and she's not really sure of his like motive or anything, and maybe they fall in love in the future, who knows, or maybe they
Hmm.
don't. And she's trying to explore like, okay, what is this guy doing, and trying to get rid of him. And so that's kind of like the basic idea of that story.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I like that.
And the other, there are so many ideas that I have. One of the other ideas that I had on that post was that I wanted to explore a little bit more is where this man marries his wife, but he's never seen her face before. And he's fallen in love with her personality and everything that she is, but not because of her face or her body or whatever, because she's been covered with a veil as he got to know her as a person. And then he sees her for the first time on his wedding night, on their wedding night, and he discovers that she is not attractive at all, but he still loves her, you know.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there's a few of the ones at the end of that post that will end up going into anthologies that I've been working on with some other writers, and they're all like in the same world. The beginning one is Mrs. Diddle, and she's a witch that is getting old, and she's losing her ability to control her power, and she's like a kitchen witch, and so like all these mishaps happen, and it's a really fun story. And then the other stories that come after that will be kind of like the characters that have interacted with her in her life. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah. So as you said, that one's going to be kind of the witch one, and the other stories involving people that have interacted with her. You said that was going to be sort of like a shared universe anthology, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. And the first two ideas that you had talked about, the monster one and the romance one, are those obviously they're two separate ideas, but are you imagining those to be kind of full length like novel type stories, or is it going to be something more like a series on Substack, or do you even know, I guess at this point, what those will be?
Yeah, so the monster one will definitely be a series on Substack.
Okay.
Maybe hopefully a novel. We'll see where kind of goes. It was actually born from the prompt challenge that I did in October.
Hmm.
Um, and so I wasn't really quite expecting it to be a long thing, but I kind of love it and I want it to be something. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah. Speaking of prompts, I'm curious how you approach like prompts for your challenges. Like, do you just kind of brainstorm ideas, and just kind of write down what comes to you, or do you have any like tools or resources that you use to kind of get inspired for prompts?
It's kind of just so for this particular prompt challenge, my thought process is like think whimsy, think things that you loved as a child
Mm-hmm.
that like I hyper focused on and thought were just really magical in my childhood. And it's mostly just like things that I think are kind of Christmassy and whimsical and fun, you know.
Gotcha. So you kind of start with like the sort of like theme or like feeling of the prompt, and
Mhm.
like sort of let it evolve from there.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Cool. That's amazing. So, yeah, when it comes to all these ideas that you're working on too, I'm curious, are you planning on going the self-publishing route, or do you plan to try and go like a traditional publishing route with any of this? What's the plan there?
I don't have plans. So, more than likely, I'll probably self-publish. But
Mhm.
if I really feel like that something is really good, I'll probably try to explore the other route, you know, and to see if people will like it too, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay. No, very nice. I like that. I'm kind of in the same boat. It's like one of those things where when I was very young and kind of decided, at a young age that I wanted to be a writer, it was always like, oh, well, I got to be traditionally published. I got to be like all my favorite authors, But it's like as I've grown and learned more about, the industry, about, like obviously interacting with the community and stuff, like I have seen that it's not all so black and white when it comes to
Yeah,
like how you approach publishing, which I think is
yeah,
great.
yeah.
All right. So, my last question that I have here in my list for you is this is something I ask every guest on the show because I love the variety of answers. But now that you've kind of, made it to this point in your creative journey, I would love to know what's some advice that you would give to a writer, say, listening to the podcast right now, who's just starting out, or maybe they're getting back into writing after a long time. What's some advice you would give them to kind of, get their feet and progress on their
Mhm.
creative journey?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that you are your worst critic
Mm.
and you should just share and see what happens with that. And even though you think it sucks, I highly doubt that people will think it sucks too, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, one of my first stories, it was called The Bringer of Toast. And it was for one of your prompt challenges. I actually thought that was just trash. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna post it. I'm just gonna post it and see what happens and see if anybody likes it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like I had written that story like within an hour, and like that was the first story that like exploded on my Substack, and I was like, oh my gosh, people like it. So I think that people just think about it too much and think about, you know, like people are going to hate this, but in reality I think maybe people might like it, you know. So yeah, I just go for it, you know. Even if it sucks, just post it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's phenomenal advice. Yeah. I always, tell people the same thing, especially when I see them, kind of posting like, if I see the seeds of imposter syndrome coming for anybody, I always say the exact same thing. And I love, love, love that story that you told us just now about how it was perfect. It was something where you were like, the imposter syndrome was telling you not to post it, but you did it anyway, and it blew up.
Mhm.
That's just
Mhm.
fantastic. I love that so
Yeah.
much. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, Tamsin, thank you again so much for coming on to the show here. It has been so wonderful getting to learn more about you and your work. And I gotta say, I'm really excited about the stuff you're working on, especially in this new year here. I've been a big fan of your work for a while, but these new ideas sound absolutely fantastic. I love the wide range of kind of cozy fantasy across all of them, these different kind of scenarios and angles that you're taking with some of these stories. So, really excited to see how things progress.
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm honored to be able to be on here, and thank you for asking me.
Yeah, of course. A huge thank you again to Tamsin for joining me on this week's episode. It was honestly such a treat to learn more about her work, the recently released First Indulgence anthology, and of course, what she has in store for 2026. Really excited to see where this author goes in the coming year. All right, let's take a look at next week on Substack. This coming week, we'll start with a new power-up prompt, and it looks like Western is in the lead, so we may be heading to the Wild West next week. Stay tuned for that. We'll also have our usual Mindful Monday checkpoint article on Monday, and don't forget that the next week's episode of the podcast here will be episode 50. I'll publish a new article in the next week or two as well, recapping my first year on Substack in time for my 1-year Stackiversary. And on that note, I just wanted to take a pause here and thank you all again for all the support this year. I can't believe how much progress we've made building this community. There's so many incredible writers and artists here sharing their work, and it's growing every day. Not only that, but this little podcast is coming up, like I said, on 50 episodes and over 33,000 downloads in, yes, less than a year. It's incredible. So thank you, sincerely, for always showing up and supporting me in the work I do here. I really couldn't do this without you all. I'm wishing you all a safe and happy new year, and I'll see you next week for episode 50. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off.
If he was being honest, Bradley forgot to write this part. That being said, he knew that he could speak from the heart.
Thank you, David. It's the end of the episode, so I don't know what else to say, except, thank you for listening, and thanks for being here, and happy holidays.
Well said, my friend.